Thank you for your patience. It appears that we at least have it partly working. For the feedback, everybody just please cross your fingers. We'll do our best to keep this sound system working so that we can move on with our meeting. As I mentioned before we adjourn for a few minutes, there is no update at this point in time. Sure, I will do my best, Mr. Moon. And there is I did want to mention for Bill Earl, I just received actually a month ago, we had an absence in our meetings, that we received a nice letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, complimenting Mr. Earl and his staff over at our County Veteran Services Office for a number of benefits that they have been able to provide to our veterans over the last year. This was actually from July 1, 2010 through June 30th, 2011. But as you know, the federal government gets us our statistics a little bit late. But on an annualized basis, they have approved and provided more than $14 million in new benefits to our veterans here in Riverside County, which is just tremendous. And Mr. Earl helped obtain $11,200,000 in one-time benefits, which consists of single and retroactive payments to our veterans and their dependents at a time when this is very difficult for our veterans who are suffering with the economy and those who come back home to us from the wars that we are in now. We appreciate all the work that Mr. Earl and his staff have done. And so, Bill, I just wanted, I didn't read the full letter, but I want to thank you and your entire staff. Thank you. All right, that now takes us to our agenda. Any corrections, deletions, or amendments?
Mr. Chairman, we have additions of items 3.76 and 3.77, deletions of items 9.1 and 9.9, corrections to continue item 3.4, June 19, 2012, and notations on to take item 3.41 off calendar.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. So let me get organized here again. Excuse me. Mr. Baby, I'll move the admin action calendar 1-1. And other than items 2.9 and 2.12 on the consent calendar, I would put those items excluding 2. Sorry?
Can't hear you very good.
We'll do the best we can. I'll do my best to speak up. The system obviously is not at its maximum, so we will all do our best to speak up, and when you come to the podium, please do your best as well. So, item 2. I'm going to move approval of the consent calendar 2.1 through 2.16, excluding 2.9 and 2.12.
And I'll second your motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. A motion and a second, please. Motion is unanimous. Taking us to item 2.9. Mr. Mabey?
Good morning, Robert Mabey speaking. I'd like to bring to the board and the public's attention that on 2.9, I believe that Supervisor Stone and Supervisor Stone should disqualify himself from hearing any of these cases. As you all know, last April, Mr. Ashley in detail had on agenda 3.3 a report showing that 300 feet of the public road out in Mr. Stone's district was blocked and has been blocked, continues to be blocked, and he finds that, I believe that it was a public nuisance, yet no one is doing anything about that. You're just picking and choosing certain people that you go after. And I believe that that's wrong, and I don't believe that you haven't got a right to do that. And that's what I'm speaking about on this agenda. How can you allow a county agency to create a public nuisance in a public road and not do anything, and yet you go after these other people who have no power? Could you explain that to me, Ms. Walls? And could you also explain to me why Mr. Tavaglione has told me to speak to your office about removing the encroachments in the public that a number of times and you don't respond to it?
Mr. Maybe, this is only having to do with order of abatement and findings of fact on rubbish abatement case in India.
I'm bringing to your attention that you are picking and choosing on this, that you're not enforcing any ordinance, you're not doing anything about public nuisances. So again, like Mr. Tavaglione brought him before to go to your office, what are you doing about the other public nuisance?
Mr. Maybe you'll have an opportunity at oral communications to address your question.
Let's have a recommendation.
Thank you.
All right, motion and a second on 2 point. All right, here we go again. Motion is unanimous. Harris? You hearing us? Okay, good. Susan Lowe, could you please come forward? We do have Susan Lowe here today, Director of our Department of Social Services, which oversees also First 5, Riverside County First 5. They have received an award, Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. Susan.
Good morning. Thank you, members of the board, for the opportunity to make a brief presentation. As you just mentioned, this spring, First 5 was recognized by the Government Finance Officers Association, which is an organization that has actually existed for more than a century and has been recognized as an expert in public financial management. First 5 was awarded a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for their comprehensive annual financial report that was filed for fiscal year 2010 and 11. Another just little fact, the GFOA created this Certificate of Achievement back in 1945, and they did so to encourage public agencies to go above the normal generally accepted accounting principles and complete comprehensive financial reports that also have a spirit of transparency and full disclosure. And the GFOA, throughout the course of the year, reviews these reports and recognizes those agencies that have succeeded in achieving those goals. And so it is quite an honor for First 5 to have received this recognition. In addition to the agency being recognized, the fiscal administrator for First 5, Sandra Duncan, who is in the audience with us today, was also specifically recognized for her oversight and direction of the financials. The commission received notification of this award at their last meeting, and it was recommended that we also bring it forward to the board. So as chair of the commission, it's my pleasure to share this news with you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. You always do a tremendous job at your agency and all those agencies under you, so appreciate your leadership.
Thank you.
Move approval of item 2.12. Okay, my vote is yes. Excuse me, unanimous. Now taking us to our policy calendar. Are there any items to be pulled by members of the board?
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yes, I'd like to pull items 3.5, 3.7, 3.34, and 3.72 for comments on those items.
452.232, an ordinance of the County of Riverside amending ordinance number 452 to establish various speed zones in the Bermuda Dunes, Gavilan Hills, Mead Valley, and Thousand Palms area.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Motion is unanimous. Okay. Now taking us to item 3.5, Supervisor Benoit, and we do have a public speaker, Steve Pastor.
Thank you, and I'd like to ask Mr. Astor to step forward if I could, please. My purpose was to introduce him, thank him for coming from the desert. We have a bill in the legislature that we believe is very rational and good policy for our ag community. Unfortunately, it looks like it's stalled for this year. If you'll tell us a little bit about it, I will suggest that the board agendize it to make sure that we support it next year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Benoit. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Orr, Ms. Wallace, good morning. My name is Steve Pastor. I'm the Executive Director of the Riverside County Farm Bureau. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for working with the Farm Bureau and supporting AB 1516, although it has been kind of stalled for the time being, which reforms the licensing and permitting requirements for agricultural pickup trailer combinations. AB 1516 provides a specific exemption that would only apply to vehicles or truck and trailer combinations used exclusively in agriculture. The use of pickups and pickup trailer combinations serve as a critical method to ensure the transport of safe and healthy crops and livestock to market. I'm going to get off the subject a little bit here. I'm going to talk about the agricultural trails map. I also want to thank the supervisors for including the Farm Bureau on the county's task force that will develop the agricultural trail map for the county. This map will allow visitors to locate and patronize local farms, ranches, and wineries, which will in turn help support our local economy, our local farmers, and our local jobs. Again, thank you very much. And we appreciate any support you can give us on AB 1516, which is very critical to agriculture, not only in Riverside County, but in California. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Supervisor Benoit.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to say, and appreciate the importance of our ag community. And Supervisor Stone and I co-authored this. We're disappointed that the bill is apparently stalled for this session, but it's a worthy cause. We'll be revisiting it. Thank you.
All right. I'll move approval of item 3.5. 3.5. Please. Motion is unanimous. Now taking us to item 3.6, Mr. Mabey.
Good morning, Robert Mabey speaking. I'd like to ask Mr. Benoit, if you adopt this, amend this ordinance and you adopt it, what's going to be the penalty for someone failing for violation of this ordinance? How about let Mr. Benoit speak, Ms. Wallace?
Mr. Maybe at the last board meeting you asked the same question.
I want to ask it again. Do you mind?
I don't mind. It's a
But I don't want to ask. I've asked
$100
Mr.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Mr. Mabey, let Pam, Ms. Walls, respond. Once she responds, then Supervisor Benoit can determine if he wants to respond on his own, and if not, then you've received your response.
All right.
This particular ordinance is requiring the disclosure online of campaign statements that are already required to be filed with the Registrar of Voters. And the penalty for violation is $10 per violation to a total of $100 in the aggregate.
Don't you think that's excessive, that fine? Imagine $10 and
Mr.
considering
Mabey,
it.
as we've discussed before, the fines are set in state law. We are simply mirroring state law with this proposal. The primary concern here is that you or the media or an opponent in a political race can know immediately who's giving money to the opposition. And the real ramification is with those people, the media, the public, and you as a candidate or an opponent who will have access to that information. And should someone fail to properly report this, the failure is far more damaging than the fine.
I don't think that's gonna work, and you know why? Because your buddy, Mr. Stone, sitting next to you, how much was he fined by the Attorney General's office? Was it 10,000? They prosecuted him in 2 cases. One was for failing to report. The other was for fraud and corruption in his pharmaceutical office. How's this going to stop him? It didn't stop him, didn't phase him before $10,000. Was it 10,000, Mr. Stone? All you did was you made excuses and blamed it on your accountant.
Mr.
You passed these laws, you put another burden on the county to enforce the law. What does it cost you? What did it cost you to put this on the agenda? What did it cost you? Could that money have been spent for something else?
Mr. Mabey, I think you've made your point.
I don't think so, because nobody even says anything.
Well, I think they say, but you don't like what anyone says. So your time is up, as you can see by the flashing red lights. So thank you. We'll call you up at your next item. Move approval of item 3.7.
Second.
Okay, motion is unanimous. Now taking us to item that was 3.6, my apology. Item 3.7, Supervisor Benoit.
Thank you. I just wanted to commend Juan Perez and the entire staff who have worked very, very hard to put together what I believe will be a very good grant application, part of the overall Sentinel Power Plant Mitigation Fund that will be, as directed by the Board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District, spent in the Coachella Valley to mitigate the effects of the power plant built in the Coachella Valley. The process is a very comprehensive one, as it should be when we're talking about public funds. And it took a lot of work to put together a very diligent proposal that I believe will propose at least 41 trailer parks and other access points that are currently dirt roads and heavily traveled to receive some form of paving to reduce the dust and the PM10 as an offset on air quality in the desert. I believe I'm not sure if there's going to be another proposal one. Is there going to be another one on potentially for a bypass road in the pass? We'll see that there's going to be probably 4 or 5 to 1 total proposals per dollars available. We'll see which ones are successful, but I wanted to commend the staff for yeoman's effort in getting it ready. And with that, I would move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second on item 3.7. Please vote. Motion is unanimous. Now taking us to item 3.34. Supervisor Benoit.
This is just, I believe, a noteworthy item that deserves a little bit more than casual approval on consent. We have an Office of Emergency Service program that helps supply emergency services to our volunteers throughout the county. The Home Depot has generously offered $10,000 in contributions of materials to their efforts, and I think that's worth noting, and I move approval and acceptance of that grant.
All right, we have and a second on item
3.34.
Thank you. 3.34. Please vote. Motion is unanimous. Taking us now to item 3.39. We do have our district attorney and sheriff that would like to speak. Mr. Orr, would you like to speak first?
Thank you. I'd like to first point out how we got here and why we're here today on this matter. We've worked really hard over the past few years to come to labor agreements with our labor associations. We finally concluded those agreements with RSA and LIUNA. And so when we concluded those agreements and those agreements were ratified, that someone put a train on a track to arrive here for approval. And that happens to be today. Either today or next week, and then we enter into the summer schedule, which becomes problematic. So that's the plain fact of why we're here today. And so we also need budget certainty and revenue and expense certainty as we enter into the preparation of the budget and finalization of the budget for 12-13. Because we know labor is a driver of what happens in this county. It's how we deliver service. It's one of the primary things, the main things that we spend money on is labor. And so we're very conscious of that. So having decisions as to our labor cost is very important for myself, for the CFO, and for all the departments as we move forward. The management, or this Form 11, has multiple moving pieces, and I want to point that out to the board. And the board has the option, and I would recommend discussion and dealing with those in different segments. First off, there's the public safety segment, dealing with the sheriff's office and the district attorney's office. And those issues are before the board for approval today, and I think there'll be a request by, I won't speak to the sheriff and district attorney, but a request for approval of those, possibly with some suggestions. In the management group, we got to remember there are multiple groups. There's managers, but there's also confidential. And those people are in this group. If they weren't for this group because of their confidential nature, they'd be in the LIUNA group, or they would be in the SEIU group, or possibly some other association. I think we need to recognize that. And I would recommend that with regards to those groups, and this may be more work, I know, for our Human Resources Department down the road, but as to that group, they receive the same compensation that we voted for, that the board voted for, and approved, or I'm going to approve today, for LIUNA. For SEIU, they have in the past. And so there is that pass through to that clerical group, that support staff group. With regards to the management group, we're primarily dealing with executive managers and managers throughout the county. And that group has been standing up for the board, for the county, saving jobs, working hard on reform, transformation, and doing a yeoman's job. And they've been recognized in their positions in doing that, and we're very appreciative. I'm very appreciative of the work that they're doing. I'm very appreciative of the work that the department heads are doing. However, these are difficult times. We need to save as many jobs as we can in the future. And difficult times call for us to be tough and to do difficult things, challenging things. And I would recommend to the board consideration of giving the managers the flex increases for health increases. We know health increases are going to increase because those are important to them and their families as they move forward in the future. And health and well-being is always important to this county, so we can come to work and live healthy lives. But I would recommend, even though it could create compaction problems, not granting the merit increases at this time for the management group and delaying that for a year. It's a tough decision. It may not be a popular decision, but I think that's the decision that I would recommend to the board today as we move forward. I know the HR director is here. We'll have some information. I look forward to her presenting that as well as the board comes to vote on these matters.
All right, thank you, Jay. Appreciate the explanations. Sheriff Smith.
Thank you, Stan Sniff, Riverside County Sheriff. Thank you, Chairman and board members. As you know, I've been before you on this issue before on compaction issues, and much of this is County Executive Officer, as outlined very eloquently, is driven from the bottom up as labor negotiations end up occurring. You end up having multi-year contracts. And as you remember back in November, I brought this to your attention that one of the contracts that directly impacts my operations, which unlike much of the county operations are 24/7, night and day, regardless of whether it's weekend or holiday, our operations involve tactical operations, involve issues of responding to emergencies, and I have a legal responsibility, as all of you know, to command and control issues where you're using deadly force, constitutional issues, and the gamut of those. And case law is pretty well settled on that. So I have a responsibility to assign authority and responsibility by what we call in a paramilitary organization a chain of command. But everybody has a functioning role in that, irrespective of the regular duty hours that most of us, or many of us in the civilian sector, enjoy. In November, I pointed out that one of the labor agreements, a previous labor agreement was already going to end up damaging my ability to promote some of the senior executives. For 339's purposes, with the Sheriff's Office, it roughly impacts some 36 separate employees, but really the center mass is the issue between the civil service protected captain and an at-will chief deputy. And as you know, in the law enforcement community, you don't skip around. You end up growing up within that pyramid. It's not like the rest of the other county departments where you can pop back and forth. Clearly, compaction issues run the gamut across the entire county, but it becomes especially egregious inside a law enforcement agency where you're drawing from the bottom up. And my ability to end up running the organization day to day with the executives I have, those are at-will employees of the county that are drawn from the ranks of civil service protected captains. And it becomes an absurdity to end up having senior people with more responsibility and more authority making less money than the people that they oversee. And for my purposes to end up recruiting, and all of you know that we've had a fair amount of turbulence as people have moved on, usually due to fiscal issues on retirement, but my ability to replace that with the best qualified people drawn from those ranks of the captains gets basically completely undermined. We support, the Sheriff's Office supports 339 and hopes you adopt that. It runs the gamut not only for the Sheriff's Office but for the other agencies, but I'm speaking for my agency in particular. The only thing I will correct in the document that you've got for, as far as correction for the record is the reality is it's not a 1% to the positive, the separation between a captain or a correctional captain and a correctional chief or a sworn chief. Right now, currently, before July 1, with many of those labor groups, particularly LEMU, which impacts us at the executive level, it's right now a negative 2%. They're making less than 2% less than the people they end up supervising. And that has occurred since January, and I gave the board early warning back in November, as I indicated, that that was going to occur and will only worsen. For the correctional series, it's nearly 4%. So this does need to be fixed. The Sheriff's Office strongly supports this effort that you end up hopefully supporting as well on behalf of all county employees, but for the Sheriff's Office, it is especially critical for a paramilitary organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Smith. Mr. District Attorney, Mr. Zollerbach.
Good morning. I read in the paper this morning that the board received a letter from one of our bargaining units expressing a concern about the proposed raises to the elected officials, in that would put their salaries at a point higher than the governor's. My response to that is the elected officials in this county are doing a better job than the governor is. I came here this morning intending to ask the board to take 3.41 off calendar. I think it's an inappropriate time to deal with that issue, and thanks to Mr. Orr, he read my mind and already took care of that issue. But I think it's important to make mention of the fact that neither the sheriff nor I sought these raises or had any involvement in this whatsoever. I ran for the office of district attorney, not for the money, but to improve the justice system in this county and to better protect the public. As a matter of fact, both the sheriff and I took substantial pay cuts. We voluntarily gave up our PERS retirement that we were collecting to take these jobs. But that's not why I'm here this morning. I'm here to speak to 3.39. And I'm passionate about this because it affects my managers. And in the district attorney's office, we're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of approximately 40 employees out of the 750 some odd that we have working in the DA's office in this county. And if you recall, when I first took over the DA's office, back in January of last year, I inherited a $6.1 million deficit. And as of now, we're projecting an over $1 million surplus in our budget by the end of this month. So we've come a long way. And it wasn't easy to make that progress, budgetarily wise. What we've done since January of last year is I have not filled a lot of my upper management positions. I have not filled the chief assistant DA position. I have a vacant assistant DA position. I have vacant four chief deputy positions. 2 supervising deputy DA positions remain unfilled. 4 assistant chief investigator positions remain unfilled. And what that has meant for the past year and a half is that my managers who are here, who are dedicated, hardworking employees, have had to do more. They've had more responsibility over the past year and a half. And they should be rewarded for that, not penalized. These unfilled positions saved us, in our budget, almost $2.5 million a year. And again, it's important to recognize their accomplishments and their achievements. But again, I think it's important to put this request in its proper perspective. The board has agreed with certain labor unions to salary increases. With respect to the Deputy DA's Association, that 4-year agreement will cost the county approximately $20 million over the next 4 years. Leona contract that was approved by the board will cost us approximately $80 million over the next 4 years. The SEIU contract that has been approved will cost over $100 million over the next 4 years. The LEMU contract that's already been approved will cost the county over $4 million over the next 5 years. And now we have the RSA contract that will roughly cost the county over $100 million over the next 4 years. I applaud both the board and the negotiators for those unions to achieve and arrive at those contracts. But what that means is the county has agreed over the next 4 to 5 years to pay these some 17,000 county employees over $300 million. Now I understand and appreciate that approximately, from what I understand, 50% of that $300 million is offset through federal grants and pass-throughs with the federal government, state government, and cities. But that still leaves $150 million cost to the net county cost.
Well, I think what you're not mentioning, Paul, is that the EPMC that we have been able to achieve in these contracts for the employee paying their share now instead of the employer, the county paying their share, is going to be at least $850 million, closer to $1 billion over the next 10 years. So I think that's important to note.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you bringing that issue up, Supervisor Tavaglione, because the managers were the first ones to suffer the cuts in the EPMC. The managers were the first ones to be furloughed. They are always the first ones to take the hit. And if you think about it, the managers, by and large, are your long-term, dedicated county employees that have been here, at least in my office, for 10, 15, 20 years or more. In my mind, they're more deserving than the county employees, arguably, that have been here for 6 months, a year, and they're getting raises. Why shouldn't the employees that have been faithful to this county, that are the leaders of this county government for many, many years, why shouldn't they be recognized? Why shouldn't they get raises equal to the troops that they supervise? The problem with this, as the sheriff commented on as well, is that by September of this year, my line attorneys, the top line attorneys, will be making more than my supervising deputy DA. By next year, my line attorneys will be making more than my chief deputy DAs. And by the end of this contract, my line attorneys will be making more than the assistant DAs. That's wrong. It's just not fair. It's not equitable. As a judge and as a district attorney, I strive to seek fairness in what we do. And that's what I'm asking the board to do, to be fair, to treat everybody equally. And because these managers are unrepresented, because they're not part of a labor union, are we going to penalize them for that? That's the wrong message to send. These are the people that have dedicated their lives to this county. They've proven themselves and been promoted through the ranks to managerial positions. It seems to me that they should be treated fairly and be rewarded. And unless you have any questions, I think I've made my point.
I don't see any questions at this point. Yes, I do, right now. Supervisor Buster.
More like a comment. Yeah, this is we're now embarking on the next phase of a major county, and I think really local public government restructuring. I mean, here we've been hit with not just the decrease in our property tax, which looks like it's going to be ongoing quite a while. We may recover, but recover slowly. But all these other uncertainties, the wipe out of redevelopment agency funding, on which we all depend in many different ways, creative ways, for a better county or better county services, and the ongoing state and even federal uncertainties, and legal uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen with our health care reform efforts, for example, that are critical to county. So we're embarking on a whole new, our first thing was the pension changes, which have been important, but have not been as extensive as are now being considered in some areas of the state. Just look at San Jose, a lot of attention on them right today. They want to completely change around future pension changes. But so there's our first phase. Our next phase is we're looking at the restructuring of all departments. Our CEO just talked about trying to thin out and rescale our agencies in the county, the Community Health Agency, the Transportation Land Management Agency. You've had your own restructuring going on. You just talked about this. It's been hard in your department, and it created a lot of this butting of heads between those that are coming up from the ranks in their compensation and your managers whose span of control has been extended out. And so it's a really important time for the county to get this right and to have a fair, as you point out, a fair plan, and with the expectations down the road that the budget people can count on, we can assume. And we're not going to get this all right overnight. But that's what I'd like to ask for, is a plan that recognizes departments like yours that have kept positions vacant. You've got less management with probably the same or increasing workloads, and we're trying to flatten that pyramid out where we can, so that we can have less of the compaction issues confronting us. And we may not be able to achieve an arbitrary separation between certain levels of management as we have in the past, arbitrary percentage. And we may not be able to give management the same percentage increases that in the near term, for the next 4 years, that we're giving line workers. Say line workers getting 3%, maybe management's going to take 2.5, maybe 1 3/4. So that we can slow the growth and the cost of our high-level employees, commensurate with what's going on in our tax base in our private sector, and recognizing what their demands are and where their savings achieved in these departments. If you're saving a lot of money on management, then there ought to be some corresponding rewards to management. So we can't do that at this session here today. In fact, I hope we can carry this discussion open at least 1 week and get some preliminary ideas about what could be done in this regard, because this is critical for confidence of the public in our services, and critical to attract and retain our best employees here. So I share a lot of your concern about what's going on, and yet we have to have creativity here, in particularly your departments, and flexibility to get through these times, because we face a situation a few years down the road, unless revenues increase beyond what the projections are, unless property tax and sales tax, we're right back here again talking about cuts. And the cuts usually land on the line workers, the layoffs, and we're right back talking about furloughs, whatever it will be. But this issue is not going away. So we have to tackle this second phase of restructuring, and that's in the management area. And I hope we can get a plan, or at least even a sketch, over the next month or so that will be embedded in our budget, and we can begin to implement it and adjust it where necessary as well. So I appreciate your comments.
Yes, I don't agree with anything you've said, Supervisor Buster. I guess the point that concerns me is the fact that this board has approved raises for 17,000 employees. If you're going to make cost cuts or cost saving, that's where you make it. It's not on the backs of the managers. The raises that this board has approved for those 17,000 employees is 18 to 21% over the next 4 years. We're just asking for equity for the managers. 40 some odd people in my office. Our office has been a good county partner for the past year and a half. And this is not a new issue. If the board recalls, back on September 13th, 2011, I was here speaking to the board about the board rescinding board policy C-20. And I mentioned at that point in time that there was a serious compaction issue in the DA's office, and the board promised me, matter of fact, Supervisor Buster, you said, well, we'll see you back here, I guess, later on. Well, here I am. Now is the day. And again, what's fair for the 17,000 employees that you have given raises to is certainly fair for the managers, and that's a cost of less than $1 million over the next 4 years to the managers in my office. I think that's a small price to pay for their dedicated work that they've provided this county for many, many years.